Well, good morning, everyone. Matt Arco here with New Jersey Advance Media, here with Steve Adubato, who had an entire, a whole hour with Governor Christie last night. We're here to kind of do a recap of last night's one-hour chat with the governor. And good morning, Steve. How's it going?
Good morning, Matt. What, you were not sure if it was an hour. Did it seem longer to you?
You could have kept on going. I think it was good. It was good. So how'd you think everything went last night?
Well, listen, the build-up to interviewing the governor, it's been about 2 years since we sat down with him. The last time was at the New Jersey Performing Arts Center right after Hurricane Sandy. And so, let me put it this way. Together with our partners at NJ.com, Advance Media, we must have had hundreds and hundreds of questions that were coming in. So there's a sense of you want to ask him everything, but you only have an hour. You know that he has a lot to say. And so, frankly, you're trying to manage the time, you're managing the content, you're trying to also be in the conversation and respond to what he says. And so there's a lot going on in your mind, and I'm confident that we did what we wanted to do, which was to have an honest, genuine conversation with the governor. And you know as well as I do, Matt, because you cover him all the time, you're out there, you're one of those reporters who really gets to have a sense of what goes on. He is not going to answer what he doesn't want to answer. And so I tried to pick the areas where I thought I could get something meaningful out of him, as opposed to asking him stuff where he was just going to say, I'm not going to talk about it, I'm not going to talk about it, which he can do an awful lot.
Right, absolutely. And I think it was good. I mean, the Associated Press had a story yesterday just about the governor kind of studying up on worldwide issues. It was a good story, and you were picking on those last night. You were asking him about certain things going on with the world. Obviously, Cuba, that was kind of at the top of the hour. What did you think of that? Was he giving good responses? I know he gave a couple of the, I'm not going to lay out my whole policy or what I think President Obama should do here, but there was mention of Syria and stuff. What did you think about that? Did you get some answers?
Well, it's interesting. You picked his spots. I was reading out, I have a tendency to look at NJ.com and the comments, which could be dangerous, as you know. And some folks are like, why did Steve Adubato ask the governor about Cuba? That has nothing to do with us. Well, let me tell you my thinking. The reason the Cuba situation has an awful lot to do with New Jersey, not only is there a significant number of Cuban Americans living here, but the other issue is this. Joanne Chesimard in 1973 killed a convicted killer. She killed a New Jersey state trooper. She spent several years in jail. She escaped in 1979 to Cuba. As part of the agreement that President Obama, reached with Cuba, try to normalize relations, the governor was saying, wait a minute, hold on. You can try to normalize relations, but what about Joanne Chesimard, who changed her name to Shakur? She's Tupac Shakur's aunt. What about the idea that a convicted cop killer, a state trooper, was killed, convicted cop killer, that she has been in Cuba for over 30 years, that part of this agreement, she's not coming back, she's not extradited back to the United States, back to New Jersey, back to prison in New Jersey? To me, that was an absolute New Jersey issue, because a New Jersey state trooper 41 years ago was killed. And so let me tell you, that is a national issue. It's a New Jersey issue. We spent a good deal of time on that, particularly because, Matt, of 2 New York City police officers assassinated on the job. So we also talked about the very important issue of protecting our police, but also dealing with the fact that a whole range of minority citizens, particularly those who are African American, feel rightfully so that they are being targeted and that police-minority relations are at an all-time low. And we asked the governor, particularly as a former U.S. attorney, what do you feel needs to be done to improve those relations? He didn't really want to talk about that. He felt that it was a time, particularly while those officers, the funerals haven't even taken place. He said, now's not the time to politicize it. I tried to press it and say, I'm not politicizing it. What do you think we need to do to heal those relations? But, the Cuba issue is very real, particularly with a cop killer over there in Cuba.
Well, and I want to ask you about that. I thought that was a good question last night. You asked the governor, it was specific to what's going on in New York, but also just kind of nationally, essentially race relations, right? The relationship between minority communities and police officers. And you tried to pin him down there. I mean, what do you think about his response? We obviously have a governor who's if not destined to run for 2016 president, certainly mulling it and giving it serious consideration. And if he does jump to throw his hat in the ring, he's going to have to kind of maybe articulate a position on some of these national issues. And he brought it back to Camden. Maybe you can explain that and tell us, did you think that he did an appropriate job of answering your question?
Yeah, it's a good point, Matt. Here's what he said. I was trying to say, look, Rudy Giuliani, who's a big supporter of yours, Governor Christie, who's a former U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York. I mean, Rudy Giuliani, say what you want about him. I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but man, is he not holding back. Maybe that's what happens when you're not running for president. He has blasted Mayor de Blasio. He has blasted Al Sharpton. And he said that they created an environment. They have created an environment that for some sickos who are protesting, they believe that it's open season on cops. And Giuliani has felt that de Blasio and Sharpton have created an environment for some who believe that cops are the enemy to go after them. And I asked the governor, look, this is a guy who supports you, a former U.S. attorney. Do you agree? He didn't want to answer that. And he said, look, well, in Camden, we created a community policing situation where the black community in Camden is much closer to the police department. That's potentially a national model. That's fine, Matt. If the governor decides to run for president, my opinion is the Camden experience will go only so far. At a certain point, he's going to have to be specific on his views on the Eric Garner situation and whether, in fact, the federal government should, in fact, step in, civil rights case, whether, in fact, the police are being targeted when, in fact, Mayor de Blasio says what he does and Sharpton does what he does in these protests. I don't think the Camden situation will take him into the presidency. I think he can talk about it, and it's useful now. As soon as you announce, if this interview were done, Matt, 2 months from now, 3 months from now, if he's a candidate for president, I think he would have had to have gone farther.
Right. And speaking about the presidency, there was obviously a few moments where he had critical remarks of President Obama. Is that without letting too much about how he feels on a certain area again with Syria? I mean, you asked him a couple of times to really articulate his point, also what we just discussed about, and he kind of dodged the issue, but he didn't necessarily. I guess he took the opportunity to criticize President Obama where he thought President Obama was wrong. Is that him, maybe getting ready for a presidential run? Is it kind of the unwritten rule that you're running against the current president that's on its way out and not any other opponent? What do you think?
I think Chris Christie's not holding back on his criticism of the president. He absolutely believes the president is a weak leader. He believes the president is a weak negotiator. I mean, he made the comment, listen to the two comments he made. He said, look at the line in the sand you drew, Mr. President, right, about Syria. He said, what happened to the line in the sand? And I asked him about ISIS, and he made that comment. I guess the president doesn't think ISIS is the junior varsity anymore. I mean, the president did make that comment that we really didn't need to be thinking about ISIS in such a serious way because the president called them the junior varsity. The governor hit the president on ISIS, on Syria. He also hit them on Sony. He said, wait a minute, Sony didn't reach out for me. The governor was saying, wait a minute, how do you not reach out for Sony? The governor picks his spots in terms of what he doesn't want to talk about. He says, Steve, you can ask me any way you want. If I'm not that informed on it, if I'm not ready to talk about it, you're not going to push me to talk about it. And he's good at that, Matt. You know better than I do because you're out there with the press corps every day. But when he does decide to hit the president, he doesn't hold back.
Right.
Also, if in fact the governor is going to try to position himself in a Republican primary, you know and I know that the hug down at the Jersey Shore between the governor and the president, which at the time I thought that was the right thing to do because we needed all the help we could get from the federal government, is something that for some Republicans way over on the right wing of the Republican Party, the conservatives, who don't like the governor for that, will never forgive him for that. The governor's also making it clear, I may have hugged him because we needed the money and he thought he was doing the right thing, and he also respected the governor, respected the president and Sandy. He doesn't like him for much else, Matt, because he seems to disagree with him on just about everything else.
Yeah, I'd say I have to agree with that, right? See, one of your last questions for the governor, obviously critical to everybody in New Jersey. You asked him, what are you going to be focusing on in 2015 in New Jersey? Can you walk us through his response and just, what did you take out of that?
The pension. Listen, it's not sexy, but when you talk about the pension liability in this state and the fact that I pressed him, I said, and he talked about it as something he wants to deal with, but I said, Governor, look, when I just interviewed Senate President Steve Sweeney, he said that you broke the deal. He said that you reached an agreement with the Democrats, and the agreement was that you were going to fund the pension. And the governor said, yeah, we agreed, but the money's not there. And I said, hold on. But Senate President Steve Sweeney says if you really want to fund the pension, you'll increase taxes on millionaires. The governor stopped me right away and said, well, that's what Democrats say all the time. They want to raise taxes on millionaires, and that's only $600 million, and that's not going to fund the whole pension. I pressed back, and I said, Governor, but it helps fund some of the pension. And he said, look, yeah, I want to help deal with that in my 2 years, but I'm not going to raise taxes because he's convinced. Look, Matt, there's a philosophical and maybe a practical issue for the governor. He believes that if you raise taxes on millionaires, people who run businesses, people who make some money, right? Mm-hmm. He says if you raise those taxes, you're never going to get that revenue. He's convinced they're going to leave the state, move to Florida where there is no income tax, and then New Jersey never gets the revenue. So then therefore you never get the money for the pension. And so that's a big priority for him. So I don't see how they're going to solve it. I don't see it. He said that he wants to increase the number of jobs. He said that the unemployment rate was at 6.5%. It was at 10% when he came in. He wants to lower it so it meets the national average. Anyone not working right now can appreciate that because to them the unemployment rate is higher than 20% because they're not working. So no, it doesn't matter who else is working. So listen, I feel like the governor's got a very challenging road ahead as he runs for president, but still tries to be the governor of the state. But he looks like he's ready to do it, and he looked like he was in fighting shape last night because I don't know if you noticed, but did he actually threaten Matt to punch me? Did he? I couldn't tell. Did he?
I think that he did. Yes, Steve. I think that he did. It was we were talking about his
he said, I haven't punched you yet. And I said, are you threatening me? He said, no, I'm not threatening you. I'm just making a point. Because I was talking about his demeanor. I thought that his demeanor is an interesting issue to me. I don't know if it is to you, Matt.
Yeah, let me ask you about that. You discussed it a little bit, and I know we just have a couple minutes here. But, since I've been traveling with the governor when he was chairman of the Republican Governors Association, right. I could tell, and when he went to Mexico, when he went to Canada, I could tell that he kind of brings a different persona with him on these trips. And when he was in Mexico, he told reporters that he has more than one club in the bag. It was a reference to being able to I guess, adapt to the situation, and that he's just not this one maybe brash governor that he says the media loves to portray him as. What do you think about that? Did you notice anything? You interviewed him over the years. Was his demeanor a little bit different last night than it was in previous conversations? He makes reference to clubs in the bag. First of all, he doesn't play golf. I do know that. He doesn't have the patience to sit around for 4 or 5 hours to play golf, which probably is to his credit. But I will say this. He does have more than a few clubs in the bag. He can be charming. He can be funny. I've done interviews with him where he's had the crowd, rolling, laughing. He's a great storyteller. And he accused me and all of us in the media of taking clips. Listen, we were running a promo on PBS, on the public television stations, to get people to watch. You remember the clip where the guy was holding up the placard and he was interrupting the governor's press conference, and finally the governor said, will you sit down and shut up? You remember that? Right, absolutely.
Well, we ran the last part of that, sit down and shut up, and the governor said, yep, Steve, you ran the last clip of that. He said, but for 5 minutes I was trying to tell the guy, listen, could you please, I'm trying to run a press conference. And it's interesting because the governor's right. We took the last part of that where he said, will you sit down and shut up? Because, frankly, we wanted people to watch the show, and we thought, hey, you never know, anything could happen. So, yes, the governor was trying to make the point, Steve, look, I apologize for nothing. I'll politely ask the guy to sit down. I'll politely ask him to let me speak. But if he doesn't, sit down and shut up. Mm-hmm. And the governor is saying he's not changing for anyone. If he does, he thinks he's being a phony. I tried to engage him and say, well, what about self-improvement? What about self-control? And he said, if he's going to go about that, he's not going to tell me about it on PBS. So it felt, again, it felt a little bit like Dr. Phil talking to somebody, doing therapy. But he's fascinating because if he is trying to change in any way, he's going to do it privately, not tell me on the air. But don't expect any changes. He is who he is. And he said, and if people don't like it, just don't vote for him. And I've got to give him credit for that. I mean, then I asked him about Jeb Bush. He said, look, I like Jeb Bush. Not part of my equation. If he runs, that's his business. Has nothing to do with whether I run or not. And I don't think he's posturing, Matt. I believe he's running no matter what.
Sure. I think there's a lot of folks out there, myself included, who would be very surprised if he didn't end up running for president. But I guess you never know, right? See, the one last question I want to ask you, just bringing it back to New Jersey, you brought it up last night again, the gas tax. Were you getting a lot of questions last night from viewers on the gas tax, and you pressed the governor on it, and it was again, he wasn't showing you, he was playing his cards close to his chest there, right?
Yeah, on NJ.com, there were tons of questions about raising the gas tax in order to deal with, as we know, what's called the Transportation Trust Fund, which was created in 1984. It was a pot of money. It is a pot of money to fix roads and bridges, the ones that are falling apart. The State Department of Transportation talks about how many roads and bridges are antiquated, which is another way of saying they're crumbling, falling down, and it's dangerous. Listen, no one's going to freak out about this, Matt, until a bridge collapses. Until people are killed. Until then, listen, can't see it, no problem.
Yeah.
Happened in the Mayanas Bridge, happened in Connecticut, happened in other states, people are killed. Nobody wants that to happen. So, how do you get money into the Transportation Trust Fund? I asked the governor, I've heard that there's a negotiation going on to raise the gas tax. We have the second lowest gas tax in the nation. What do you say? And he turned around and he said, Steve, look, I don't negotiate with you on public television. I negotiate with legislators. And he said to me, unless you have votes in the legislature that I don't know about, I'm not going to talk to you about this. I'll do it privately. I said, well, do you support a gas tax? He said, I'm not going to talk to you about that. So I think you've heard that response before, Matt.
We have.
I wasn't going to talk about the gas tax, but he apparently, my sources tell me, and I'm sure your sources tell you, Matt, because yours are better than mine, that there is going to be an agreement on the Transportation Trust Fund, and I bet there is not going to be a gas tax. They're going to find another way to fund it so that nobody down in the State House can ever put their name next to anything called a tax.
Sure.
Smoke and mirrors, but it'll get done.
It's been interesting over the years. I remember years ago it was definitely not a gas tax, and now the standard line is everything's on the table. If there's cuts here, so it will be interesting to see what happens. Steve, I'll let you end it. Any parting thoughts? Anything that jumped out from you from last night?
I found it engaging, interesting, challenging, and I also want to say to everyone on NJ.com, I appreciate all of your feedback. I appreciate the people who liked the interview. I appreciate those who thought I did not ask the right questions or did not follow up. I assure everyone that together with all of our partners at NJ TV, WNET, and NJ.com, and Fios One, and everyone else who we worked with, that we did the best that we could. And for those who feel that I wasn't tough enough on the governor, I look forward to the one day you having the opportunity to ask the governor tough questions and him giving you more direct responses, because we all need direct responses from the governor. But I'll say this. When he decides he's not going to answer, Matt, he's not going to answer. But we wish you and everyone at the Ledger and NJ.com and Advance Media a great holiday and a terrific new year. And you guys are great partners. Thank you very much, Matt.
Absolutely, Steve. Thanks so much for joining us this morning, and thanks for everybody for joining in. And like Steve said, have a great holiday, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.